And with me now is Guy Ziv, Assistant Professor in the U.S. Foreign Policy Program at American University's School of International Service. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Elaine.
A different scene 24 hours ago. What happened?
There were expectations that perhaps this time the Netanyahu era would come to a close. I think what we're seeing is time and again the opposition leaders making the same mistake, which is to try to convince the public that Netanyahu's been there long enough and it's time for a change. And what they've done is they've turned it into a personal referendum on his character rather than addressing the issues. And one of the reasons they've done this, or the main reason they've done this, is because most Israelis self-identify as right-wing. And so there's a real fear among the opposition leaders, whoever they are, they don't want him to portray themselves as leftist or left-leaning, which is exactly what Netanyahu has done. So he puts them on the defensive, and rather than present a coherent alternative, they are intentionally vague on the substance, vague on the issues, and instead go after him on a personal level. And that's failed time and again.
It was a lot closer this time around, though.
It was closer this time, but the reason it was closer this time is because the centrist party managed to get votes from the center-left voters who abandoned the traditionally left-leaning parties. And so what we've seen is pretty much a collapse of the left, and that's where they got their votes from. They did not get votes from right-leaning voters.
Netanyahu has said, "I will be prime minister for all." What are the challenges ahead for him?
Well, I thought that was a very ironic comment coming from the prime minister who is the most divisive prime minister in the country's history. He has divided the nation, pitted Jews versus Arabs, the right versus the left, the religious versus the secular, and I can go on. So this is a task that I'm not sure Netanyahu is cut out for. I think what we're going to see in the months ahead is Netanyahu cobbling together most likely a right-wing religious government. The ultra-Orthodox did very well, and they're going to have demands, as are Netanyahu's coalition allies. The new centrist party, led by Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid, is going to have to figure out what their approach is going to be as leaders of the opposition.
I want to ask you about corruption allegations against Netanyahu. A lot has been made about what could come down the road in the months ahead. What is your outlook on that?
So we know that the Attorney General has already made it clear that he intends to indict Netanyahu. Now, there will be a hearing. Netanyahu will be able to defend himself, but based on every report out there, the Attorney General is most likely going to issue an indictment. And the question is whether or not Netanyahu will then be forced to resign or whether he can continue to remain prime minister. And one of the suggestions that has been raised by Netanyahu allies is to implement what's called the French law, which would grant him immunity, and that might be a demand made of the coalition partners who end up joining his government.
Guy Ziv, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.